I found the locket in his trash can, the one my daughter wore the day she disappeared. My hands shook as I clutched the tarnished silver, the chain cold against my palm. 20 years of grief tightened my chest. Frank, my quiet neighbour, had smiled at me over the fence just this morning. Now I stood in his backyard, trespassing under the moonless sky. I needed proof, something to tie him to Sarah. The risk was immense. If he caught me, my fragile trust in this community would shatter. I heard a car engine down the street and froze, pressing myself against the rough wood of his shed. I knew what I had to do: get inside his house and find more. The back door was unlocked, a stupid oversight or a trap. I slipped inside, the floorboards creaking under my weight. The smell of bleach hit me, too strong, masking something else. In the dim light, I saw a stack of newspapers on the kitchen table, all from the month Sarah vanished. My breath caught. Then a shadow moved in the hallway, and the door clicked shut behind me. Back in my kitchen, I spread the newspapers on the table, my heart pounding. Each headline screamed of missing girls, but one photo showed Frank in the background. Younger, at a fair Sarah had begged to go to. I had to confirm this was him, link him to that day. It was costing me my sanity. Every rustle of the wind made me jump. Every creak of the house sounded like his footsteps. I called the library, asking about old fair records, but my voice trembled. Frank knocked on my door, offering a pie, his eyes lingering too long on my hands. I declined, my smile brittle. He left, but I saw him watching from his window. I needed to digitize these photos before he realized what I had. Scanning them one by one, I noticed a pattern. The same van in multiple shots, parked near where Sarah was last seen. My fingers froze on the keyboard. The scanner jammed, and when I pulled the photo out, a small, handwritten note fell from behind it. She fought too hard. The doorbell rang again, insistent. I hid the note in my recipe box, my hands slick with sweat. Frank's voice came through the door, asking if I needed help with the noise, the scanner beeping. I yelled that I was fine, but he didn't leave. I needed to get to the police station, but he was blocking my way, his truck parked across my driveway. Time was running out. Every minute he stalled, the evidence felt more fragile. I pretended to garden, digging near the fence, while I plotted a route through the back alleys. He offered to fix my sprinkler, his tools clanking ominously. I declined, but he started anyway, his presence a constant pressure. A neighbour's dog barked, distracting him, and I seized the chance to slip out the back gate. Halfway down the alley, I realized I'd left my phone on the table. Turning back, I saw Frank in my kitchen window, holding the recipe box. He looked up, our eyes met, and he smiled. I drove to the next town, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. The police station was my target, but I needed more than a hunch. I was risking isolation. No one would believe a grieving grandmother over a pillar of the community. I stopped at a copy shop, making duplicates of the photos and note. The clerk eyed me strangely, but I paid in cash. Frank's pressure followed me. A text from an unknown number. Missing something. My blood ran cold. Back in the car, I checked the rearview mirror. A dark sedan trailed me at a distance. I took a detour through a busy mall lot, losing them, but my gas light blinked on. At a quiet gas station, I filled up, my mind racing. A man approached, offering help, but his jacket bore the logo of Frank's landscaping company. I declined, driving off with the pump still in the tank, the attendant shouting. In my panic, I'd left the copies on the passenger seat, but when I reached for them, they were gone. Home felt like a trap now. I barricaded the door, my breath coming in short gasps. I planned to set a camera in Frank's house, catch him in the act. My safety was on the line. If he found it, I was dead. I rummaged through my late husband's old things, finding a tiny spy cam he'd used for bird watching. The battery was low, but it would have to do. Frank's pressure was relentless. He mowed his lawn, the roar of the engine masking any sound, his eyes darting to my windows. I waited for dusk, then crawled through the bushes to his side door. It was locked, but a spare key was under the mat. Too easy. Inside, the smell of bleach returned, stronger. I placed the cam on a bookshelf, aiming at his desk. As I turned to leave, I saw a framed photo I hadn't noticed before. Frank and Sarah, laughing, from a school event I never knew about. My legs gave way. Then the desk drawer slid open, revealing a stack of IDs, all with Sarah's face but different names. I scrambled to my feet, the IDs clutched in my hand, their plastic edges digging into my palm. Frank could return any second. I had to get out now. My heart hammered against my ribs as I stuffed the fake driver's licenses into my pocket, each one a slap of betrayal. The door was still ajar, but footsteps echoed from the driveway. Heavy, deliberate. I ducked behind the desk, my knees protesting, and held my breath. If he found me, the quiet of our street would bury my story forever, and my life was at stake. As he entered the room, his keys jangling on the hook by the door, I could feel the weight of his presence. He hummed a tune, something from an old commercial, and moved toward the kitchen. I needed to reach the back window, but my path was blocked by a stack of boxes. Then his humming stopped, and I heard him pick up the framed photo of Sarah and him. "Still here, little bird," he whispered, and the sound of a drawer opening followed. A phone buzzed, and he answered, his voice low. "Yeah, she's getting close. I'll handle it tonight." The call ended, and he walked out, leaving me trembling. I crept to the window, but it was painted shut. The only way out was through the front, past where he stood. As I inched forward, my foot knocked against a loose floorboard, and it creaked loudly. Frank's head snapped toward the sound. I bolted for the front door, my lungs burning, and burst into the cool night air. Frank shouted my name, but I didn't look back, diving into my car and peeling away from the curb. I aimed to reach the state police office 2 towns over because local cops might be in his pocket. He knew I was onto him, and my home was no longer safe, so I had lost my anonymity. In the rearview mirror, his truck's headlights flared, gaining on me. I swerved down a side road, my hands slick on the wheel, and lost him in a maze of suburban streets. As my phone lit up with unknown calls, the anxiety grew, and I silenced it, focusing on the road. At a red light, I fumbled for the IDs, but my pocket was empty. They must have fallen out in my rush. Despair clawed at me until I remembered the spy cam. It might have recorded something. I pulled into a 24-hour diner parking lot, using their Wi-Fi to check the feed. The camera showed Frank rifling through my recipe box, but then he paused, holding up a small key I'd forgotten, the one to my husband's old safe. He smiled, pocketing it, and the feed cut out. My blood ran cold. That safe held Sarah's childhood diaries. I drove to my sister's empty cabin in the woods, a place Frank didn't know about. I planned to lay low and figure out my next move, using the cam footage as leverage. I had no phone and no way to call for help without risking exposure, leaving me isolated from the world. The menace from Frank trailed me. News alerts on the diner TV mentioned a concerned neighbor report about me, painting me as unstable. I set up a laptop with a borrowed hotspot, reviewing the cam footage frame by frame. In the background, I spotted a map on Frank's wall, marked with red dots near where other girls had vanished years ago. Suddenly, a knock came at the cabin door, and I froze, expecting Frank. But it was a young hiker, lost and asking for directions. I sent him away, my hands shaking, and returned to the screen. When I zoomed in on the map, a disturbing fact surfaced. One dot was on my street, right where Sarah used to play. Frank hadn't just taken her, he'd been watching for years. As I digested this, a car engine growled outside, and headlights swept across the windows. The door handle jiggled. I barricaded the door with a chair, my mind racing. Frank was here. I had to survive the night and get that map to the authorities. My hope was fading. Each moment stretched into a lifetime of fear. I peered through the curtains and saw his silhouette approaching, a tire iron in his hand. As he started pounding on the door, the wood splintering, the dread intensified. I grabbed a fire poker from the hearth, my arms trembling, and backed toward the rear exit. Out of nowhere, my phone, which I'd thought dead, buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Check the safe. He lied. Confusion warred with terror. Who was this? I hesitated, then remembered the key Frank took. It occurred to me that maybe the safe didn't hold what I thought. As Frank broke through, I fled out the back into the woods, the cold air biting my skin. Branches scraped my face, but I pushed on, toward a ranger station I recalled from past visits. Behind me, Frank's shouts faded, but then a flashlight beam cut through the trees, too close. I tripped over a root, landing hard, and looked up to see a figure standing over me. Not Frank, but a woman I'd never seen, her face grim. The woman helped me up, her grip firm, and whispered, "I'm Lena, a reporter, Frank's wife before he changed." I began to think about trusting her, but it meant dropping my guard. What if this was another trap? We hurried to her car hidden down the trail, and she explained she'd been investigating him for years, after their divorce. As Frank's voice echoed nearby, calling my name like a taunt, the tension rose. Lena showed me files on her laptop, photos, records, all linking Frank to multiple disappearances. All at once, my spy cam feed updated, showing Frank in my house, opening the safe. But instead of diaries, he pulled out a stack of letters, my husband's handwriting visible. A jarring truth came to light. My husband had known Frank from years ago, and the letters hinted at a cover-up. Lena gasped, pointing to one line. "We protect our own." Frank's flashlight beam swept toward the car, and he smiled, raising his phone. A message popped up on Lena's screen. "Tell her the truth, or I will." The engine roared to life as we sped away, but in the rear view, Frank stood calmly, watching us go. The car swerved as Lena cursed, her eyes glued to the rearview mirror. "He's following us," she said, her voice tight. I clutched the seat, my heart pounding as we sped down the dark highway. I needed to reach a motel where we could examine the letters safely, but Frank's truck loomed behind us, its headlights blinding. I was losing trust in everything, my husband, my neighbor, my own memories. Lena shoved a folder into my lap. "Read this," she urged, but the words blurred as Frank rammed our bumper, jolting us forward. I focused on the road ahead, spotting an exit for a truck stop. As we veered off, Frank didn't follow, instead continuing straight. A sudden change that left me uneasy. At the motel, we locked the door and spread the letters on the bed. My husband's handwriting detailed meetings with Frank, discussing cleanups and silence. One line stood out. "Sarah was an accident." My breath hitched, a small but shocking revelation that shattered my world. Then Lena's phone buzzed with a photo. Frank standing outside the motel room, holding a gasoline can. We barricaded the door with the dresser, my hands shaking. I needed to call the state police now, using the letters as proof. But my phone had no signal, and the landline was dead. The isolation was deafening. We were alone in this fight. Frank's shadow moved past the window, his footsteps heavy on the gravel. Lena whispered, "There's a back window. We can climb out." As we pushed the bed toward it, a news report on the TV caught my eye. A story about a disturbed grandmother wanted for questioning in a burglary. Frank's doing. The pressure mounted as smoke seeped under the door. He'd set something on fire. We scrambled out the window into the cold night, but my ankle twisted on landing, pain shooting up my leg. Lena helped me to her car, and we sped away, the motel glowing orange behind us. In the car, I checked the letters again and found a small key taped to one envelope, labeled Storage Unit 214. A new lead, but as we drove, headlights appeared behind us, matching our speed. Lena gripped the wheel. "It's not Frank," she said. "It's a cop car." The police car flashed its lights, pulling us over. I hid the letters under the seat, my mind racing. I had to convince the officer of Frank's crimes without sounding insane, but my credibility was shot. I risked arrest, or worse, if Frank had influence here. The officer approached, his face stern, and asked for IDs. Lena handed hers over, but I fumbled, my hands trembling. As he radioed in, I noticed his badge, the same department Frank's brother worked for, according to Lena's files. The pressure intensified when he asked us to step out of the car. Suddenly, a truck roared past, and Frank leaned out, shouting, "They're armed!" The officer drew his weapon, and chaos erupted, a sudden distraction that saved us from scrutiny but put us in greater danger. We dove back into the car and peeled away, the officer distracted by Frank's theatrics. Down the road, Lena revealed she had a contact in the FBI, but we needed hard evidence first. We drove to the storage unit, using the key, and inside we found boxes of girls' belongings, shoes, hair clips, diaries. One diary had Sarah's name on it. My legs gave way, but then a noise came from outside, the gate closing and a lock clicking into place. We were trapped in the storage unit, the metal door sealed shut. I needed to find an escape route and preserve the evidence, but the air was growing thin, and we risked our lives. Frank's voice echoed through the walls, taunting us. "You shouldn't have dug so deep," he said. Lena and I searched the boxes, finding a vent near the ceiling, too small for us, but big enough to toss out the diary. I shoved it through, hoping someone would find it, but my strength was fading. The pressure built as Frank started a generator, pumping fumes into the unit. Coughing, I remembered my husband's old tools in one box and grabbed a crowbar. We pried at the door, but it wouldn't budge. Then, a sudden interruption. A car horn blared outside, and Frank's shouts turned to panic. Through a crack, I saw a woman, Lena's source, arguing with him. She distracted him long enough for us to force the door open, and we stumbled out, gasping. But Frank was gone, and the woman handed me a note. "He has a cabin in the woods, where he takes them." We drove toward it, but as we arrived, the cabin door swung open, revealing a room lined with photos of Sarah and other girls. Frank stood in the center, holding a knife. "Welcome home," he said. I backed away, my eyes fixed on the knife. I had to survive and make him confess, but it meant facing the horror of what he'd done to Sarah. The cabin was a shrine to his victims, with locks of hair and dated mementos. Frank advanced, his smile cold. "Your husband helped me cover it up," he said, his voice dripping with malice. He thought it was an accident, but I enjoyed it. The pressure was overwhelming. I had no weapon, and Lena was outside, dealing with a tripped alarm. I spotted a fireplace poker nearby and lunged for it, but Frank was faster, knocking it from my grasp. As he raised the knife, a sudden change, Lena burst in with a tire iron, swinging at him. They struggled, and I grabbed the poker, striking his arm. He dropped the knife, howling in pain, but then he pulled a gun from his waistband. "Enough games," he snarled, aiming at me. Just then, headlights flooded the room, and voices shouted, "Police! Freeze!" But Frank didn't lower the gun. He smiled and said, "They'll never believe you." He fired, but the shot went wide as Lena tackled him. In the chaos, I saw a photo on the floor. Sarah, smiling, with a date the day after she disappeared. My blood ran cold. She might have been alive here for a time. The police rushed in, cuffing Frank, but as they led him away, he whispered to me, "She called for you," at the end. Then he was gone, leaving me shattered in the silence. The police led Frank away in handcuffs, his final words, "She called for you," at the end, clawing at my sanity. I stood in the cabin's grim interior, photos of missing girls plastered on the walls, Sarah's face smiling from a snapshot I'd taken on her 10th birthday. Lena touched my arm, but I pulled away. My focus was on locking Frank away forever. I needed to hand over all the evidence to the detectives, but it meant facing the emotional avalanche I'd avoided for 20 years. Detective Miller, a stern man with a badge gleaming under the cabin's dim light, questioned me about my husband's letters, his tone hinting at suspicion. The pressure spiked when Frank's lawyer, Mr. Graves, arrived and argued that the search was illegal, threatening to get the case thrown out. Just as Miller seemed to waver, an officer yelled from a back room. He'd found a hidden compartment behind a bookshelf, stuffed with more victims' diaries and a list of names including local officials. My legs buckled when I saw Sarah's hair clip among the items. Miller's demeanor shifted, and he ordered me to the station for a full debrief. As we drove off, I glanced back at the patrol car. Frank stared through the window, his lips forming a silent, chilling threat. At the police station, I sat in a cold interview room, recounting every detail of Frank's crimes. I was determined to ensure the evidence was logged properly, but it came with the gnawing fear that Frank's connections would protect him. Detective Miller took notes, but his questions circled back to my husband's involvement, making me feel like a suspect. The pressure mounted when Mr. Graves submitted a motion to dismiss, claiming I had a vendetta. Just as I felt overwhelmed, Lena rushed in with a message. An anonymous source had tipped her about a storage locker Frank used near the highway. We left the station, but on the drive to my house to retrieve more documents, I noticed a dark sedan tailing us. Lena swerved into a side street, losing them, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. At home, I went to the attic for Sarah's old keepsake box, but when I opened it, the journal I'd saved was gone. A floorboard creaked downstairs, and I crept down to find a man in a hoodie rifling through my desk. Lena grabbed a fire poker, but he bolted out the back door. On the floor, he'd left a crumpled note. "Back off, or you're next." I bolted the doors, the note burning in my hand. Lena and I decided to investigate the storage locker immediately. Waiting felt too dangerous. I was set on finding irrefutable proof against Frank, but it involved stepping deeper into his web of terror. We drove to a remote industrial area, the locker unit tucked behind a rusted fence. The pressure intensified as we picked the lock and entered. The air was thick with dust and decay. Inside, we found crates of women's clothing and faded IDs, but one box held Polaroids of Frank with victims, alive and captive. My stomach churned seeing Sarah in one, her eyes wide with fear. Suddenly, footsteps echoed outside, and we hid behind a stack of tires. A man entered, Officer Brandt, from Miller's team, and he began searching the crates. Just as he spotted us, Lena lunged, but he drew a gun. A shot rang out, and Lena gasped, clutching her shoulder. Brandt fled, and I rushed to her, using my scarf as a bandage. As I helped her up, I noticed a dropped notepad with Brandt's name and a list of payoffs from Frank. Lena whispered, "He's dirty," and I knew we were on our own. I drove Lena to a secluded motel, her wound bleeding through the makeshift bandage. I had to get her safe and expose Brandt, but it meant cutting all ties with the police. The pressure grew as my phone buzzed with alerts labeling me a fugitive in Frank's narrative. At the motel, I used Lena's encrypted phone to call an FBI contact, but the line crackled with interference, likely jammed. Just then, a text came through. "I have evidence. Meet at the quarry at midnight." It was from Martha, Frank's ex-sister-in-law. I left Lena resting and drove to the quarry, the moon hidden behind clouds. Martha waited by an old truck, her hands trembling as she handed me a USB drive. "Frank recorded everything," she said, her voice shaky. But a rifle shot echoed, and Martha collapsed, blood soaking her shirt. I dove behind the truck, and through the darkness, I saw Brandt reloading his weapon. He advanced, shouting for me to come out. As he closed in, I spotted a narrow path leading down the quarry wall. I scrambled toward it, but Brandt fired again, the bullet ricocheting off rocks near my head. I slid down the slope, the USB drive gripped tight, and hid in a crevice. Above, Brandt's flashlight beam swept the area, and he called for backup. My escape route was blocked, and the drive felt like my last hope. Crouched in the quarry's shadows, I assessed the USB drive. It was intact, for now. I needed to reach the FBI office in the next county, but I had to evade Brandt first. Martha's life weighed heavily on me, a fresh ghost in this nightmare. Brandt's voice echoed as he descended the path, his radio crackling with orders to apprehend me. The pressure was suffocating. If he caught me, the evidence would die with me. I spotted a drainage tunnel nearby and crawled inside, the cold water soaking my clothes. Emerging on the other side, I found myself near a highway on-ramp. I flagged down a trucker claiming car trouble, and he agreed to drop me off near the FBI building. But as we drove, I saw Brandt's car following, his siren blaring. The trucker panicked and pulled over, and Brandt approached with his gun drawn. Just then, Lena's car screeched in, blocking Brandt's path. She jumped out, aiming a pistol, and shouted for him to stand down. Brandt hesitated, and in that moment, I sprinted toward the FBI building. As I burst through the doors, agents surrounded me, but one took the USB drive. Relief washed over me until I saw Brandt talking calmly with an agent inside. He was flashing a badge I hadn't seen before. The agent handed the drive back to Brandt, and he smirked at me. "Evidence?" "What evidence?" he said, pocketing it. My heart sank as I realized the corruption reached higher than I ever imagined. Brandt pocketed the USB drive with a smug grin, and the FBI agents escorted me to a holding room, treating me like a criminal. I had to find a way out of this building and expose the corruption. But my credibility was shattered, and I faced possible imprisonment. The sterile walls of the room felt like a cage, and Brandt's laughter echoed in the hallway. Just as an agent began questioning me, Lena burst in, her arm bandaged, but her eyes fierce. She flashed a press badge and demanded my release, citing unlawful detention. The agents hesitated, and in the confusion, I slipped out a side door into a parking garage. Lena followed, and we ducked behind a van, but Brant's voice echoed over a radio, ordering a lockdown. My heart raced as I spotted a maintenance cart with keys in the ignition. We jumped in and sped toward the exit, but a gate slammed down, blocking our path. Then my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Check your cloud storage." Martha backed it up. I fumbled with my phone and found a folder labeled Frank's Truth with videos and documents. Relief washed over me until headlights flooded the garage. Brant stepped out, aiming his gun. "Game over," he said, but a car horn blared and Lena shoved me behind a pillar. Brant fired, and the bullets sparked off metal near my head. We escaped through a service tunnel, the sound of sirens fading behind us. I needed to get the cloud data to a trusted journalist or law enforcement outside the state, but it meant navigating a web of distrust. Lena drove us to a safe house she knew, a cramped apartment above a bakery, the smell of bread masking our fear. The pressure mounted as news reports labeled me a fugitive, and my face flashed on screens in a nearby cafe. I accessed the cloud files on Lena's laptop. One video showed Frank confessing to multiple abductions, including Sarah's, while Brant listened in the background. My hands trembled, but then the Wi-Fi cut out, a jamming signal nearby. Lena peered through the window and spotted a van with tinted windows parked across the street. We packed up, but as we headed for the fire escape, a knock came at the door. It was Martha's daughter, Emily, her eyes red from crying. She handed me a flash drive. "Mum's back up," she whispered. But then a shot rang out, and the window shattered. We dove to the floor, and Emily screamed, clutching her arm. Outside, Brant's silhouette moved toward the building, and I knew we had minutes to flee. I grabbed the flash drive and we crawled out the back, but Emily's wound slowed us down. As we reached the alley, Brant's voice called out, "I have your granddaughter's diary." My blood ran cold. He'd taken something personal from my house. In the alley, I bandaged Emily's arm with a torn scarf, my mind reeling. I had to retrieve Sarah's diary from Brant, but it meant walking into a trap. Emotionally, it was crushing. Every reminder of Sarah felt like a fresh wound. Lena helped Emily to a friend's car, and we split up to draw less attention. I headed to the local library, using a public computer to email the cloud data to a federal reporter Lena trusted. But as I hit send, the screen went black, a system override. Brant's face appeared on a security monitor nearby, his voice tinny through the speakers. "I know where you are." I bolted for the exit, but the doors locked automatically. Trapped, I remembered the library's old boiler room from a visit with Sarah years ago. I pried open a vent and crawled through, dust choking me. In the darkness, I found a stack of donated books, and among them was a yearbook from Sarah's school. Flipping through it, I saw Frank listed as a volunteer coach, and a photo showed him with Sarah's friend, a girl who disappeared a month later. The pattern was clear, but then a hand grabbed my ankle from the vent. Brant had followed me in. He yanked me out, his grip like iron, and whispered, "Frank wants to see you one last time." Brant dragged me to his car, the diary tucked in his jacket. I fought to break free, now focused on surviving this encounter and turning the tables. He shoved me into the passenger seat, handcuffing my wrist to the door. The drive was silent, except for the hum of the engine, and I noticed a GPS device blinking, tracking our route to Frank's old cabin. The pressure intensified as Brant mocked me, detailing how Frank had manipulated the system for years. Suddenly, he swerved to avoid a deer, and the car skidded into a ditch. The impact jarred the handcuff loose, and I scrambled out, running into the woods. Brant followed, firing shots that echoed through the trees. I ducked behind a large oak, my breath fogging in the cold air. Then my phone vibrated. A text from Lena. "I have backup. Stall him." I shouted to Brandt, offering a deal, but he laughed and closed in. Just as he raised his gun, a figure emerged from the shadows, Detective Miller, his own weapon drawn. "Brandt, you're under arrest," he said, but Brandt spun and fired. Miller fell, and in that moment I tackled Brandt, grabbing the diary from his pocket. We struggled, and the diary fell open, revealing a hidden compartment with a small key. Brandt's eyes widened, and he snarled, "That's for the lockbox." Then he knocked me aside and fled into the darkness, leaving me with the key and Miller groaning on the ground. I helped Miller to his feet, his shoulder bleeding from Brandt's shot. He radioed for assistance, his voice strained, and I knew I had to use this key to find the lockbox before Brandt did. My energy was dwindling. Each step felt heavier than the last. We drove to Miller's secure location, a cousin's farm outside town, and he patched himself up while I examined the key. It was labelled Station 5, which I remembered as an old train depot Frank mentioned in the videos. The pressure built as news alerts reported Brandt as a fugitive, and Frank's trial date was set, but I feared he'd weasel out. Lena arrived with supplies, and we planned a raid on the depot for dawn. But as we prepared, Miller's phone buzzed. A message from an insider. "Brandt's heading there now." We rushed to the depot, a decaying building shrouded in mist. Inside, we found a lockbox behind a false wall, and the key fit perfectly. It contained photos of Frank with high-ranking officials, including a judge and a ledger of payments. My hands shook as I realized the scale of the corruption. Just then, Brandt stepped from the shadows, a knife in his hand. "Thanks for leading me here," he said. But before he could move, sirens wailed outside. Miller had called it in. Brandt lunged at me, but Lena tackled him, and they wrestled for the knife. In the struggle, Brandt slashed Lena's leg, and she cried out. I grabbed the ledger and ran for the door, but Brandt broke free and blocked my exit. "It ends now," he hissed. But then a shot rang out, and Brandt collapsed, clutching his chest. Miller stood behind him, smoke curling from his gun. "I'm clean," he said, but his eyes darted to the ledger in my hands. I didn't know if I could trust him. Miller lowered his gun, but I didn't lower my guard. The ledger clutched tight in my hands. Brandt lay motionless on the depot floor, blood pooling around him, and Lena groaned from her leg wound. I had to get this evidence to a secure location and verify Miller's loyalty, but trusting him felt like betting my last shred of hope. Miller holstered his weapon and reached for the ledger, his eyes pleading. "I'm on your side," he said, but the words rang hollow after all the betrayals. Sirens wailed closer, and the pressure spiked as red and blue lights flashed through the broken windows. Lena struggled to stand, her face pale, and I helped her toward a back exit. Just as we reached the door, Miller's radio crackled with a dispatch. Officers were responding to a shots-fired call, and the description included me as armed and dangerous. My heart sank. The corruption ran deeper than I thought. We slipped into the alley, but a figure emerged from the shadows. Emily, Martha's daughter, holding a phone. "I recorded Brandt's confession," she whispered, handing it over. But then headlights swept the alley, and a voice shouted, "Freeze! FBI!" Agents surrounded us, and Miller stepped forward, flashing his badge. "They're with me," he said, but one agent eyed the ledger in my hands. "We'll take that," he said, reaching for it. I pulled back, and in that moment, Miller shoved the agent aside. "Run," he yelled, and we bolted, the ledger safe for now. But as we rounded the corner, I glanced back and saw Miller being cuffed by the agents. His sacrifice bought us time, but we had lost another ally. We drove to a remote motel, Lena's leg bandaged tightly, and I hid the ledger under the mattress. I needed to upload the evidence to multiple secure servers before anyone else found us, but the emotional drain was overwhelming. Each loss felt like a piece of me chipping away. Lena used her press contacts to arrange a drop with a federal investigator, but the Wi-Fi was spotty, and my hands shook as I typed. The pressure mounted when news reports announced Miller's suspension and my face as a person of interest in Brandt's shooting. Just as I connected to a satellite link, a car pulled into the motel lot, a black sedan with government plates. We ducked below the window, and I finished uploading the files, but a knock came at the door. It was the investigator, a woman named Agent Reyes, her badge genuine this time. She offered protection in exchange for the ledger, but I hesitated, remembering past deceptions. Lena nodded, and I handed it over, but Reyes's phone buzzed with a message. Frank's lawyer filed for dismissal based on tainted evidence. The revelation hit hard. Our proof might be useless if the chain was broken. As Reyes left, she promised action, but my phone dinged with an alert. Frank had been released on bail. I stared at the screen, disbelief washing over me. Then a text came through from an unknown number. I know where he's hiding. Meet me at the old mill. It was signed a friend, but the timing felt too convenient. I drove to the old mill alone, leaving Lena to rest. I had to confront Frank before he disappeared, but it meant facing the man who destroyed my family. The mill was decaying, its wheels still against the night sky, and the air smelled of rust and damp wood. Inside, shadows danced in the moonlight, and I clutched a tire iron for protection. The pressure intensified when I heard footsteps. Frank stepped from the darkness, his hands raised in mock surrender. "You've caused a lot of trouble," he said, his voice calm. I demanded the truth about Sarah, and he laughed, detailing how he'd kept her alive for weeks in a basement, taunting me with descriptions of her cries. I felt it viscerally. My legs trembled, and tears blurred my vision. Just as I raised the tire iron, a voice shouted, "Stop! Police!" Agent Reyes and her team surrounded us, but Frank smirked. "No evidence, no crime," he said, and Reyes hesitated. Then a recording played from my phone, Emily's file of Brandt confessing to covering for Frank. Reyes moved to arrest him, but Frank lunged at me, knocking the tire iron away. We struggled, and he pinned me down, his breath hot on my face. "She died begging for you," he hissed, but a gunshot echoed, and Frank collapsed, clutching his side. Reyes stood over him, her weapon smoking. "That was for obstruction," she said, but Frank grinned through the pain. "You'll never prove it all," he wheezed, and I saw a flash drive fall from his pocket. I grabbed it, and Reyes cuffed him, but as she led him away, he whispered, "Check the drive. Your husband's in there too." My world tilted, and I stood frozen, the drive feeling like a lead weight. Back at the motel, I inserted the flash drive into Lena's laptop, my hands numb. I had to expose the full extent of the corruption, even if it meant learning horrible truths about my husband. The files revealed videos of Frank with officials, including my husband, discussing payoffs and disappearances. One clip showed my husband agreeing to silence witnesses after Sarah's accident. The emotional blow was crushing. The man I'd loved had betrayed our daughter. Lena held my shoulder, but the pressure escalated when Reyes called. Frank was in custody, but his lawyer was pushing for a deal based on the new evidence. I needed to get this to the media immediately, but my phone rang with a threat from an unknown number. Drop it, or Lena pays. Panic set in, and I rushed to check on Lena, but she was gone, her room trashed. A note lay on the bed. Midnight at the bridge, come alone. I drove to the location, the flash drive secure in my pocket, and found Lena tied to a chair, a man in a mask holding a knife to her throat. "The drive!" he demanded, but I hesitated, spotting a police cruiser nearby. Just as I tossed it, sirens blared and Reyes's team moved in. The man fled, and I untied Lena, but the drive was gone. Defeat washed over me until Lena smiled weakly. "I copied it," she said, handing me a duplicate. Relief flooded in, but then my phone buzzed. Frank had escaped during transport. The message was simple: "I'm coming for you." We sped away, but as we turned onto the highway, headlights rammed us from behind, and our car spun out of control. The car skidded to a halt, steam rising from the hood, and I clutched the duplicate drive, my body aching. Lena was unconscious, but breathing, and I dragged her from the wreckage. Frank's truck idled nearby, and he stepped out, a knife glinting in his hand. I had to end this for Sarah, but it meant facing him without backup. The road was deserted, and the night air was cold against my skin. Frank advanced, mocking my efforts, but I stood my ground, the drive safe in my pocket. "It's over," I said, and he laughed, charging at me. I sidestepped, and he stumbled, giving me an opening. I grabbed a rock from the roadside and swung, hitting his arm. The knife clattered away, and we struggled, but then headlights appeared, Reyes and her team, responding to my distress signal. They surrounded Frank, cuffing him, and this time, it stuck. The evidence was overwhelming, and within weeks, Frank was convicted, along with several officials. The quiet after the storm was strange. I visited Sarah's grave, placing flowers where she lay. Lena recovered, and we stayed in touch, but the peace felt earned, not given. I moved to a small town where the memories were lighter, and spent my days gardening. The weight of revenge finally lifted. Sarah's smile in old photos no longer brought tears, just a gentle ache of love. The world moved on, and so did I, in my own way.